Hello. How's everybody doing? Good. I'm an artist. I've been in the space about 2 years now. I'm also an advisor on a lot of different projects. I have a lot of fun in this space. My background, I worked in television, I worked in animation. I started about 20 years ago making flash cartoons on newgrounds.com. Some of you might know that. It goes way back. But back in the day, I would make cartoons, I would post them, and I got really into this feedback I would get. People would say, "Oh, this is terrible," or they would love it. And that fueled me to keep creating, and that drove me to learn animation in Philadelphia, and then work in the industry trying to make a living doing animation, which is not easy. A lot of people in LA probably know that. Since then, I joined the space. I used a lot of colorful imagery to kind of bring people into deeper ideas about creation, about cryptocurrency, about NFTs. You can see I kind of love to experiment with different technologies, whether it's three-dimensional, traditional animation, generative, or whatever. The space has it all, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And then, I've been fortunate to see my work also displayed in, the auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's, but I've also had the, ability to work with fun brands. And, if you walk down the street, you can see an ad I did for Gemini that's playing like a couple blocks down, which is really cool. And so there's a lot of cool ways you can use NFTs to kind of bring your art into all these different dimensions, whether it's real life or digital. And so today I'm going to kind of take that 2-year journey and compress it into advice for new artists, because I think there's a lot of kind of students and new people hoping to learn about the space here today. So the first thing is, early in my journey, I was given advice that really kind of helped me out, which was everybody is winging it. And by that I mean there's no set path for you to take. Everybody's kind of experimenting. We're all learning from each other. Events like this are a perfect example. There's no right or wrong way, but I do think there's a right way to think about how to divide your time and energy. And that falls into 3 categories: creation, connection, and promotion. And so let's talk a little bit about that. The first one is creation. Everyone here, I hope, is, you don't have to be, but I hope you're creative people. And let's talk about that idea of how to create for the space and what value you create. In general, my advice to artists entering the space is create art that you enjoy making. By that I mean, if things work out and you can do this for a living, make sure that you really enjoy the process, because this is like a dream come true if you want it to be. Don't worry about chasing trends. I mean, you can look and see what sells for $1 million, but make what you personally enjoy making and really speaks to what you do. That's a general advice. I don't want to tell anybody how to create, but just make stuff that you're happy making. I think that's really important. And then what you create. Doesn't even touch the surface of all the things that you can create with NFTs, but what I think is interesting about all of these is that you can kind of take any 2 or 3 of these and combine them and make interesting stuff in this space. You can make an illustration that's also integrated with a photograph, So I think don't limit yourself to just thinking of like one type of thing in the space. Really utilize all the ways that the space allows you to create. And then the other thing I want to talk about is value, which I think is the harder, more difficult, weird part about the space, which is, as artists, we're minting money or value when we do this. Whether it holds any value or not depends on how you handle it, but you have to think about what you make after the sale or after you put it on the blockchain. And so, this is something I said the other day, which is just create more value than you take. How do you create and manage that value? Well, you have to think about what happens after the sale, because we're all, as artists, we're financially invested in the future of what we put out into that blockchain. And so when I talk about value, the first one is like kind of supply and demand. That's your value, that, the auction price or the floor price. But as an artist, you can bring value to your artwork in a lot of different ways. And so the community of collectors you build around your work is a huge amount of value, because they connect with each other and network and grow together. You also have an opportunity to educate people about this space. And then we get into this kind of access, which by that I mean an NFT gives you access to not just the artist, but also to events, to projects that are maybe connected with them or related to other people. And then there's the historical aspect of value, which is if you do something in the space that's considered a first, that gives a lot of value to that piece. If you're pushing the technology further, you're creating more value. And then finally is identity, which I think we all see in kind of profile picture projects. Creating art that allows people to create an identity for themselves has a lot of value. And so a lot of artists come into how do I price my artwork, which is a really tough question. So we're going to talk about this in what I like to describe as a cone, not a pyramid. But let's all just agree it's a cone. And when you look at minting and controlling your supply, the first thing is your one-of-ones. That's your special pieces that, for me, are the things that tell people most about myself. Those are the things I spend the most time on. I want those to be special. Collectors value them the most. If you're a new artist in the space, I recommend making your first piece a one-of-one, just for posterity purposes. It allows you and the collector to say, this is the first. And I think that's important. And then, talking about my own journey, when I started in the space, I minted about 20 one-of-ones on Super Rare before I ever did any editions. And that was to kind of keep a pace, allow me to find myself in the space, and also find my value. And once you have that kind of understanding of what your art is worth, you can start thinking about the next wave, which is maybe doing some limited editions. And I think, when I did that, I first started doing editions of 10. And how you price that, think about it as fractionalizing your art. So if your one-of-one sell for, say, 1 Ethereum, you could sell 10 editions for 0.1 Ethereum. And that's kind of an easy way to think about fractionalizing it in a way that holds the general value of a piece of art that you create. Next, we're seeing a lot of right now, which can be described a bunch of ways. I like to call it one-of-one. We're seeing that on art blocks. We're seeing that on async blueprints. We're seeing that on FX hash. It's using assets, GAN, generative work to create unique pieces that live in a generated collection. And it also kind of plays into this idea of kind of blind box toys, which kind of trigger this collecting mentality. And we're seeing a lot of that, but I don't recommend doing that right away. I always look at these things sequentially as you want to build yourself up in the space. But once you reach that point, it's really fun. I did one on art blocks called Nimbuds, and it was great. And there was about 400 editions, and that's just a way of kind of thinking about value and growing your scale. And then finally, not finally, but the next step is large editions, which, yesterday we saw Xcopy. He did an open edition with 7,000 editions all around one singular piece. And that allows you to expand your community and have them all kind of rally around a single piece. We saw Trevor Jones do that as well with his Bitcoin Angel. And so I think it's an effective way. But again, both of those artists did that well after they established their artwork and their value in the space. Next, I tend to look at this as like free plus secondary, which is you create artwork that you can give to people as a gift or as a reward, whether it's wearables in a virtual world or airdrops or gifts. It's a cool way to kind of reward, grow, but then if it ever flips, you can earn an income that way. So I always kind of, again, looking at all this, you kind of get the sense of size and value. And then the last one is I call mementos. That's POAPs, postcards. It's basically merch. It's a way for you to kind of reward people, but also use that as a promotional tool, which goes into the second part of the pie chart. Well, actually, we're going to get there in a second. First, we're going to talk about where to mint. Marketplace choices. I've done a little bit of both. I recommend both, but you have to kind of think about where you want to be as an artist. If you're unestablished, it might be worth trying to get on the curated platforms because they're going to validate you to new collectors. They're going to help promote you, but they take a commission, and sometimes those applications can take a long time. So the other option is going the independent route. It gives you more control over your contract, gives you a flexibility on how you drop your art and control it, but you have to work on discoverability. It's really tough. And that goes into the next part, which is promotion. And so at this point, you have your art. Plan for minting, you have to think about how to market it. And when I think about why collectors collect art and what they enjoy about it, it falls into this idea of show and tell, which kind of goes back to when we were children and we collect a cool toy and we bring it to the class and we go, hey, this is really neat, and this is why it means something to me. And I think that is a one-to-one translation to what we see in the space right now. Collectors want to share the art, and they want to elevate the artist. So as creators, we need to promote our art and convey why we created it so they can do that properly. And so let's just talk about the showing the art. When I create art, I create it with that idea of showing it in mind. And by that I mean, if it's an NFT wallet, if you make a video, make a cool thumbnail, or make a thumbnail that really represents it well. Think about how it's displayed on those open seas or whatever. Social media, make it a GIF so that it's easy to translate. AR, VR, make cool sculptures that look cool in these curated galleries that collectors are making. Down the street from here, the Dream Hotel has a bunch of digital displays. They have 16:9 wide and tall and square screens. Create your art with those in mind so that it can be displayed properly. And so I think that's a really important thing to think about as you're creating. You don't have to live within those, but it'll make it easier for collectors to show it. Here's an example of a 3D sculpture I made on Super Rare, and you can see how they took it into their On Cyber gallery and kind of displayed it, and that allows people that go visit it to see my art and learn about it in a cool, interactive way. And another example is I did a Nifty Gateway drop earlier this month, and I made an AR filter that kind of creates this explosion of clouds on your face. It's a cool way for people to interact with the art, but then they also go and they share it on social media, and that's another cool way to get promotion that's not necessarily like forcing them to promote for you. And so we already talked about the show now. Let's talk about the tell. I think telling your story and telling your art story is really important. How you document it is really important. I think it's tough for artists because a lot of us are introverts, and so you have to kind of look at the different routes you can take for sharing and telling your story. I think if you're an introvert, maybe consider writing a blog or an editorial about why you made it. If you're an extrovert, record a video of yourself or go on a Twitter Spaces and talk about it. I think there's different ways, but either way you need that kind of content to kind of educate the collectors on why and what they're buying. And when I joined the space early, I used this blog called Scent, and when I made a piece, I would show the whole process of how I made it. I would talk about why I made it. That allowed both artists and collectors to kind of have a deeper understanding of what I did, but the bonus of that, it was also proof of work. And so as the space grows and people question whether artists are actually making their work, this became a receipt of authenticity that builds that trust early on when you're a new artist. And then where you show and tell your work, all the social medias are valid, and they all have different demographics. I think Twitter is the strongest right now, but if you're, say, a generative artist, you can go on Discord to a generative art, centered Discord and hit a more niche audience in that way. TikTok's going to hit a younger audience and a bigger, broader audience, but again, that's a more, extroverted approach. And then, that last icon I think is very underused, which is e-newsletters. A lot of these social medias have algorithms that kind of sort out your tweets and posts. If you can get people to give you their email and you can tell them updates about your work, it's extremely powerful and directly hits them in their email. And then that last one, let's go back to mementos. Here's some examples of mementos I gave out. Whether it's a postcard for someone visiting in crypto voxels or wearables for people that own my Nifty Gateway drops, or people that own Nimbuds, I sent them their Nimbuds as buttons and stickers and drawings, or people that had the Worm NFT. There's a lot of cool ways that are kind of inexpensive ways to grow and appreciate your collectors and kind of bring them into your world. And an example of that is POAPs, which if you find me after this, I have a QR code on my phone you can scan, and you can get a POAP that says, hey, I met Bryan in LA. And that's just a really cool way to get into somebody's wallet in a way that's non-intrusive. I think we're seeing a lot of problems with spam in this space. So you have to make sure that people invite you into their wallet. But once you do that, that's a business card to a degree. And you can, be on their mind every time they look through their collection in a really cool way. Oop. And that connection is the next part. And so connection, to me, is the final and most important step. The NFT space is not just a marketplace, but it's a community. Sarah touched on it a little bit as well. And I think the easiest way for you to do that connection is by literally getting involved, putting your energy and time into going on social media, going into Discords, connecting with artists, collectors, interacting, having conversations. I know it seems like that's not work in the grand scheme of it all, but it really is. And so, I think your following will likely grow if you authentically interact in the space. And authenticity and trust is one of the most valuable assets in this space. Collectors are often investing in you as much as they are your art. So you got to make sure to take that time to nurture those relationships. Make sure they feel appreciated by doing all the promotional mementos. And then join cool communities. Make an effort to put a third of your energy into this. It's the most rewarding part of the space in my mind. The digital connections you build grow into real-world friendships, and just like any other industry, those connections lead to opportunities. I wouldn't be where I'm at now without the opportunities given to me from the connections I made early on in the space with other artists. And so, join those Discords, collaborate with artists, grow together. It's really rewarding. And yeah, in terms of social media, I found a lot of my success came from elevating the space and not necessarily promoting myself, but promoting the space, promoting other artists. In the end, the promotion side is about yourself, the connection side is about others. And so you have to invest that energy effectively. And again, I think all three of these are equally important if you want to find success and grow in this space. And so you really got to think about how you're creating, who you're connecting with, and how you're promoting it. And thank you all. I hope that helps. And thank you to McCole, Colborn, Hahn, and everybody else.